Why would a man walk into a pawn shop carrying an old wooden box? Not to sell it, not to show off, but simply to ask one question that would silence the entire room? In the flickering light of that shabby pawn shop, William Bill Carter, a veteran whose eyes carried a lifetime of memories, placed a chipped silver medal on the counter. Its engraving bore the name of someone no one had ever heard of. "I just want to know if it still means anything," he said, his voice low, as if whispering to the past. That question didn't just shake the indifference of everyone in the room. It summoned a Navy SEAL whose arrival would change everything. This isn't just the story of a medal. This is the story of honor, of sacrifice, and of the weight of promises never forgotten. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss a single moment. Together, we'll keep these memories alive. Are you ready to hear the story the world has ignored for far too long? On a pale afternoon, when the sun was hidden behind layers of slate-gray clouds, William Bill Carter quietly pushed open the glass door of a dilapidated pawn shop in a neighborhood on its last breath. The jingle of the little bell above sounded like time itself exhaling, frail, unnoticed. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and an invisible chill, as if every discarded object in the room had seeped its sorrow into the space. The cracked tile floor made no sound under Bill's footsteps. His dark brown leather boots, worn but carefully polished, had soles thinned by countless years. He carried no cane. He did not shuffle like the weary figures in old war films. Yet there was a quiet fatigue about him, not of the body, but of a soul that had weathered too many winters. He bore none of the swagger of a man who once donned a uniform, no medals pinned to his chest, no banners or slogans, only silence, as though he was accustomed to entering places where he was least expected. The room was bathed in a wan glow from a flickering fluorescent tube overhead, making everything seem even more exhausted. Stacks of antique TVs, a few guitars with peeling paint, rusty tools thick with dust, all formed a tableau forgotten by time. Behind the counter sat a young man named Noah Bennett, just over 20, slumped against the backrest in an oversized gray hoodie, earbuds buried in his ears, thumbs endlessly scrolling across his phone screen. His face wore the look of someone convinced life was one endless, boring video. When Bill stopped before the counter, Noah didn't budge. He didn't even glance up. Bill slipped his hand into his coat, moving deliberately, fingers trembling slightly, as if the weight of memories pressed upon each joint. Then he produced a small wooden box, unassuming, yet handled with unmistakable care. Though its surface was scratched by time, its hinges gleamed, oiled and preserved. No explanation was needed. Anyone could tell it had been treasured through decades of storms, dust, and the countless moves that erase forgotten pasts. Bill set the box on the glass countertop. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, not from sound, but from the invisible weight just placed there. He opened the lid to reveal a silver medal with a faded red and blue ribbon. Etched on its face were the words, "James Dawson, 1972. The trembling light reflected off the metal's surface, making it blaze like a memory reborn. At last, Noah lifted his eyes, narrowing them with a hint of confusion and skepticism. His frown had nothing to do with the medal's worth, only that it carried too many meanings he could not fathom. He curled a half smirk, half joke. "This? For real? Where'd you get it?" Bill did not answer immediately. He stared at the medal as though it spoke secrets only he could hear. His voice was low, dry, as if muffled by the dust-laden air. It was awarded to me. An awkward silence followed. Noah scoffed, the typical reaction of youth unaware that some things are not to be mocked. You got it for winning a sack race at boot camp? That lame joke drew a loud laugh from another man in the shop, a fellow in a black leather jacket named Derek Malone, standing near the door, helmet dented in his hand. Grandpa's toy? He jeered, eyeing the medal like it was just another worthless trinket. But Bill remained steadfast, not ashamed nor angry. He had nothing to prove. Without looking at anyone, he simply replied, his words slicing through the room's indifference. Because I saved 2 men from a fire. 1 I didn't start. No one spoke. In that instant, the noise seemed to recede, yielding to a heavy sense that untold stories pressed in from every corner. His statement wasn't boastful. It was an ancient truth kept alive only to prevent it from being forgotten. And yet, in that pawn shop, who had the patience to listen? Or would it drift away like so many lives who came and went, leaving behind a medal no one understood? In a wooden box once polished with a heart's devotion, the room remained silent. Yet the atmosphere felt palpably heavy. It wasn't that something horrific had just occurred. It was Bill Carter's silence that made every object in that cramped shop seem to freeze. This was not empty silence, but a dense weight pressing on everyone's chest, so subtle they scarcely noticed. Noah froze for a few seconds. His eyes blinked rapidly, as though trying to dispel the confusion clouding his youthful face. He hastily spat out his chewing gum, attempting calm, yet his voice betrayed him. "Hey, sir, I don't know what you're trying to do here," Noah stammered. "We don't take this kind of stuff. You could sell it online, like to those military gear collectors." Bill didn't react. No anger, no sadness. He simply looked at Noah, his gaze piercing, as though drilling through the young man to some other place, a place of vanished figures, where people once understood the value of the sacrifice that this small object symbolized. "I didn't come to sell," Bill said softly, each word dropping like an echo from the depths. "I came to see if anyone still understands what it means." Noah shrugged. His eyes darted back to his phone screen. He chewed gum, voice flat, as if discussing an old toy. "It's just a piece of metal, buddy." Those words bore no malice, yet they sliced through the air, through memory, through decades of what Bill had buried. An accidental cut, sharper than any blade. It drew pain without blood. Derek, the man in the leather jacket still near the door, laughed loudly, deliberately empty. "You planning to trade the Medal of Honor for a tank of gas? Or maybe a hot pizza for dinner?" In another corner, a teenager fiddled with a stack of vintage game consoles. He didn't look up but muttered, "Bet you bought it on eBay, making stories for kicks." Then came scattered laughter. Laughter that scraped at the listener's heart, not for its overt mockery, but for its callous indifference. Each person in that room seemed unconcerned, yet that very indifference made everything far worse. Bill remained unmoved. His hands rested on the wooden box as though it alone kept him from shattering. There was no rage in him, no fury, only a subtle shift, a weight rising from the depths of memory. He knew that feeling. He'd heard such laughter before, in bars near the base where old soldiers drank in silence, at half-hearted memorial ceremonies, and most painfully, at James Jimmy Dawson's funeral, when a child's ill-timed laugh cut through the grief, and no one stopped it. He had once let it pass. He had turned away, locked it away in the drawer of his mind, telling himself the world no longer cared for old things. This time, he nearly did the same. One more step, and he would have left quietly, leaving it all behind as he had done countless times before. But he did not go, because leaving was easy, and Bill Carter all his life had never chosen the easy path. He stayed. He held the box with both hands, as though embracing the remaining fragments of a man named James Dawson, and all they had endured. He said nothing more. He waited in silence, clinging to the fragile hope that someone would understand, remember, know what it once meant. And then, the shop bell rang again. The air shifted. Heads turned simultaneously. Laughter died as if strangled mid-air. No one told anyone, yet all knew. The newcomer was no ordinary man. His silhouette drew a collective, deep intake of breath. He needed to do nothing. No words, no frown. Just stand there in a dark, long coat draped over a tall frame, impeccably shined shoes, and a steady stride. Suddenly, no one dared speak or laugh. There was no music, no cinematic effect. But the way he looked at Bill, then down at the box, rendered the pawn shop hallowed. No longer a repository for cast-offs, but a room where time stood still, and memory was lifted from the dust. The moment the man crossed the pawn shop threshold, he needed no words to command attention, no grand gesture, no clamor. He simply existed. And that presence shifted the room's atmosphere, like a chill wind slicing through sweltering air, carrying with it a strange stillness and reverence. He wasn't as tall as those Hollywood heroes. He wore no battle-scarred armor, no steely glare from war films. Yet each step he took made the ground feel firmer beneath his feet. His simple, well-polished leather shoes made no sound, though the worn soles bore the marks of time. His navy blue shirt was crisp, cuffs neatly folded, folds tracing the outline of disciplined years. Near his left breast, a small insignia, a gold-plated trident, rested quietly. Enough so that any veteran would know this man had walked through hell and come back. No one in the shop knew his name until now. Thomas Tom Riley, former Navy SEAL, veteran of missions the world will never hear about. He sought no spotlight. He hadn't come to stir trouble. Trouble, he knew, tended to shrink away from men like him. Laughter died in the air. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to fade. All attention converged on one point, the small wooden box on the glass counter, and the salt and pepper-haired man staring at it. Tom did not look around. He fixed his gaze on the metal, then turned his eyes to Bill, and in that instant, there was no relic, no customer, only two men, one holding memory, the other honoring its worth. Tom stepped forward slowly. Each footfall felt consecrated. He didn't hurry, his hand extended, careful as if touching the last fragment of another's soul. He lifted the silver medal, cradling it in his rough palm, hands that had once saved lives, once trembled with loss, once gripped a weapon in pitch-black nights. He turned the medal over, silently reading the inscription carved deep. James Dawson, 1972. No words were spoken, but emotion welled up nonetheless. Then he straightened, and in a gesture bearing all the respect of a warrior, he brought his hand to his brow. Salute. Not a salute to Bill, nor to the room, but to what the medal represented. Those who never returned, souls resting in foreign soil, whose names go unspoken each dawn. Promises kept in silence, beyond the glare of any spotlight, only blood, mud, and gunfire as witness. The pawn shop seemed to freeze. Noah dared not breathe. Derek, the joker in the leather jacket, stood petrified, the mockery gone from his eyes, replaced by something like regret. Even the familiar flicker of the ceiling lights felt smothered. Tom gently replaced the metal in its box, as if afraid to harm the past. Then he looked at Bill. No words, only a short nod, yet it spoke volumes. Not pity, not mere gratitude, but recognition between those who have faced what no one wants to remember, yet cannot forget. Tom turned toward the counter. His voice rang out, deep, steady, not loud, but each word sharp enough to cut through the room's indifference. This medal is not merely a piece of metal. He did not address anyone in particular, yet every gaze fixed on him. It is forged from blood, from the promise to value another life above your own, from courage that is never boasted. He glanced at Bill, then at Noah, calm yet grave. It is worth everything this man risked, worth all it saved. Nothing can buy that with money. And then, softly, I have been there, not in the same battles he fought, but across another desert, in another war. And I know that feeling. When the guns fall silent, when comrades fall, and silence is all that remains in your ears. He paused, not out of hesitation, but to let his words sink deep. Men like him do not demand to be remembered. They remember everyone else. Then Tom spoke no more. He left behind a void, not for someone to fill, but so that everyone in the room might grasp what they stood before. A moment, perhaps brief, but a reminder that not every medal is meant for a wall. Some are kept in the heart by those who understand that true value lies not in appearance, but in memories bought at the price of a lifetime. Tom's words were neither loud nor furious, yet their echo struck like a blow to the chest. No shouting, no raised fist, just a cold, precise sentence, and its simplicity made it razor-sharp, slicing through every trace of indifference in the room. No one laughed again. The earlier giggles now felt shameful to recall. Noah, still behind the counter, seemed stripped of his fragile youthful armor. He fumbled with the receipt roll in the printer, fingers entangled, no longer sure what he was doing. His eyes dropped, avoiding contact, as if confronted by something greater than a mere mistake. That was ignorance itself. Derek was different. The leather-jacketed man said nothing, yet his muscular hand grew gentle as he returned the guitar to its rack. Gone were his usual careless motions. Gone was the mocking grin meant to assert dominance. Now, even these inanimate objects once treated as trash were met with somber respect. Tom glanced around the shop. Not a glare of intimidation, not a threat, just a steady look strong enough to make everyone shrink back. In his eyes shone clarity, experience, nightmares lurking beneath calm resolve, something only time and war can carve into a man's gaze. Then he spoke softly, like a teacher concluding an unwelcome lesson. Don't mock what you've never had the courage to earn. No one dared respond. Tom did not wait for apologies, nor did he seek thanks. He simply nodded to Bill. A final nod, simple yet profound, exchanged between those who know the true cost of silence. Not pity, not boastfulness, but respect. For a man who kept silence for decades, only to remind the world today of what it seemed to be forgetting. Then Tom turned and left the shop. The door opened, the bell tinkled, faint as a dying breath of an era slipping into the past. Tom stepped out like a solid shadow merging with the waning daylight of the aging town. Inside, silence reigned. No one resumed their tasks. It felt as though a bucket of icy water had been poured over the room, awakening, but heavy with regret. A strange quiet, not awkward, but a stir of true awakening. Noah cleared his throat, a small dry sound, as if his voice were blocked by that nameless feeling. He tried to speak, but his words dissolved into the air, leaving only the printer's soft whir. Derek quietly rose, stepping away from the guitar rack. He no longer moved with his usual swagger. His actions were now oddly careful, as if even this old instrument deserved more reverence than before. And there, in the center of the room, stood Bill Carter, unmoved. He did not smile. He said nothing. He showed no sign of triumph, no gloating relief at being vindicated. For he never demanded recognition. He simply waited to see if this world still had enough respect to remember what it had forgotten. Then he bent, gently closed the wooden box's lid. Its hinge gave a soft click, a small sound, but heavy as a seal, locking away memory. He tucked it under his arm, neither cradled nor cast aside, as if it were part of him, unostentatious, yet ever present. And then he walked out. His worn boots whispered against the tile floor, the quiet murmur of years long past. But this time, something remarkable happened. No eyes looked down at phones. No one scrolled TikTok. No one tapped at keyboards. No feigned busyness. Everyone watched him. Not with idle curiosity, not with the earlier sneer reserved for an eccentric old man with dusty relics, but with a silent acknowledgement, a belated respect. They saw him as if for the first time, understanding that some walk among us bearing invisible burdens, weights unseen, unasked, yet without which this world would be different. And in that moment, Bill Carter was no longer the strange old man. He became a living symbol of a generation that sacrificed so others could live, without ever knowing why. He did not pause at the door. He did not look back. He just walked on, silently, steadfastly, expecting nothing, except that one day someone would remember. Bill Carter's story did not end at that pawn shop. It did not close with the jingle of the bell behind him or the uneasy glances of onlookers. In truth, for men like Bill, the story never truly ends. It merely transforms, quietly, persisting in the moments we least expect. Every year, in November, when fallen leaves carpet the sidewalks and a crisp wind begins to whip through the streets, Bill appears in a small park on the town's edge. No one invited him, and no one awaits him, but still he comes, as though to a rendezvous needing no confirmation. In his hand, he carries a flag, folded neatly into a perfect triangle, its crisp edges and straight creases as faithful as a soldier's loyalty, and a steaming cup of coffee, though he never drinks more than a few sips. That cup is not for him. It is a symbol, part of a private ritual, small yet sacred, understood only by him. He sits on a worn wooden bench, one that has witnessed many winters of silence, without looking around, without seeking attention. In his hands there is no sign, no slogan, no medal on display, only a whisper, softly spoken, of a name gone from this world. James Jimmy Dawson. Jimmy was 22, a young soldier with bright eyes and dreams of becoming a country singer. He fell in Bill's arms amid the blasts and dust of a world without an audience. In his final moments, Jimmy did not cry. He smiled, and with his last breath murmured, "Tell my father that I was not afraid." And Bill kept that promise, Not for any medal, not out of duty, but because that is what men like him do. They keep promises with blood, with silence, and with a steadfast presence every November. Soldiers like Bill do not crave applause. They only ask to be remembered. One day, a boy appeared beside him, unannounced, unassuming. He sat at the bench's end, respecting distance yet close enough to feel. His name was Lucas Luke Evans, 14 years old, with eyes still wide in wonder, yet reflecting a maturity beyond his years. He said little. He simply handed Bill a small scrap of paper, creased and faded at the edges. On it was his older brother's handwriting, his brother who had fallen in a distant place. "Keep doing what matters, even when no one applauds." Bill read it, folded the paper, and tucked it into his shirt pocket, where he once kept Jimmy's dog tag. They spoke no more. They sat together on that pale afternoon, sharing grief in pure silence. No words needed. Sometimes, true pain only requires someone beside you. After that day, Luke quietly took a photograph. Simple. Bill on the bench, the folded flag in his arms, the steaming coffee cup at his side, and an old military cap resting on his knee. No filter, no elaborate caption, just one word: remember. He posted the photo online, and what no one expected happened. The image spread. From that small town, it crossed digital boundaries to families who lost loved ones on battlefields, to veterans living in quiet solitude, to children who'd never known war, yet suddenly felt they'd lost something they never had. Names began to appear beneath the post. Stories, brief but heartfelt comments. My father was David. My brother served in Iraq. My husband never came home. Each share a piece of a larger mosaic, the forgotten courage, the silent love, and gratitude unspoken. Then, a miracle. Every November thereafter, people gathered around that bench. No one called for it. No signs were posted, yet they came, drawn by instinct. There was the local librarian bearing an old poetry collection about anonymous soldiers, a mail carrier standing at a respectful distance with his cap in hand, even the mayor skipping town hall to stand in silence at the bench for a few moments, and unexpectedly, Noah, the young man who once mocked the medal, arrived too. He brought nothing, said nothing. He simply stood, eyes reddened, head bowed in a silent apology. No one filmed or live-streamed. They did not come to capture a moment. They came to be present, sharing the silence Bill had kept for years. That silence was no longer lonely. It became empathy, deep, quiet, yet resonating farther than any trumpet call. And so, each year, the bench no longer sits empty. It has become a place of remembrance, not only for Jimmy Dawson, but for all the unnamed heroes never carved into stone. A small monument in a small town, yet powerful enough to still thousands of hearts in a single moment. Bill's story needs no ending, for in that silence, memory lives on. And so long as someone comes to sit beside him, to share a cup of coffee never fully drunk, Jimmy will never be forgotten. The next year, in November, the bench in the park was still there. Golden leaves still drifted with the wind, and the air still carried that familiar chill. But this time, Bill did not come. No one knows the day he slipped away. There was no farewell ceremony, no mournful siren, no procession in his honor. He chose to leave as he had lived, quietly, without fanfare, without expecting anyone to notice. On the small kitchen table of his humble home, they found a handwritten letter and a neatly folded flag. The letter was brief. It made no mention of war, nor of any medal. Only a few short lines about Jimmy, about the promise he had kept, and about what he hoped those left behind would never forget. Don't let names vanish into silence. News of Bill's passing swept through town like a sharp gust over the chest. No one cried out, no one panicked, but the silence that followed weighed like lead, for someone who once walked unnoticed at life's edge had become the center of a community's memory. And then another November arrived. Luke Evans, now 15, taller, broader-shouldered, and with eyes changed by understanding, came carrying the flag Bill had left behind, still folded with care, still bearing the scent of years and faint fraying where it had been held close. Alone, he stepped to the bench, into the circle of silent onlookers. With trembling hands, he unfolded the flag, then began refolding it, crease by precise crease, just as Bill had taught him last year. Head bowed, eyes focused, Luke handled each corner of the fabric as if holding a soul. When he placed the final fold against his heart, everyone, without a word, lifted their hands in salute. Not merely to honor Bill, not merely for the flag, but for all the names Bill had whispered, for James Dawson, for those who never returned, and for the promise that none would be forgotten. Among the gathered faces were those of many familiar people, some in work uniforms, some bearing flowers, some simply standing still. And in the back corner, Noah, no longer the careless youth, stood quietly, hand over his heart, eyes no longer clouded with mockery, but shining with understanding. No one spoke aloud. No one live-streamed or filmed a TikTok, yet each person brought their own fragment of memory, a story, a name, a loss known only to them. The mayor, once preoccupied only with schedules and speeches, had personally brought a small plaque affixed to the bench. Upon it were just 3 simple words: "This place matters." No logos, no grand national emblem, no lofty words of glory or triumph, just a humble truth. This spot matters because someone sat here, remembered, and did what was right when no one was looking. And so, year after year, the bench endures as a silent witness. The flag continues to arrive, to be folded carefully by its successor, and the quiet around that bench has become not emptiness, but a reminder. Some things sacred require no spotlight or applause. They simply must be preserved. Bill has gone, but he never truly vanished. He lives on in every cup of coffee brought but never finished, in every measured fold of fabric, in Luke's eyes, no longer a child seeking meaning, but a guardian of memory, and in Noah's gaze, once mocking, now knowing that not every lesson comes from a classroom. One fold may signify loss, a final period. But 10 folds, like those on that flag, proclaim a testament, a legacy passed on not by words, but by repeated action, until it becomes part of a community's soul. This story has never been only about a medal, nor about a silver-haired man entering a pawn shop. It is a reminder to the world that honor needs no applause, that silence, when born of truth and loyalty, can resound farther than any battle cry, and that the names we whisper in quiet moments may hold the power to change a town, and, if we listen closely enough, perhaps even the world. And that story is far from over. For memories like those of Bill Carter, of Jimmy Dawson, and of all who keep their vows in the darkness, find ways to live on in the hearts of those willing to listen. through a photograph, a folded flag, or a moment of silence amid a busy day. And you, my dear viewers, are part of that journey. Join me as we await the next chapters of stories that will leave you awestruck, moved, and sometimes breathless. So before you feel at ease to go, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, only if you truly feel what I'm striving to preserve here. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love to see kindred spirits tuning in from around the world, especially from the dear United States. And if this story has touched you, share it, so that values like honor, gratitude, and memory may echo farther than ever before.